Is Pure Snake Eye for sure the best deck? Is there no way to create or innovate anything else within this format? If you look at past results and the opinions of most of the other pro players, it may seem like Pure Snake Eyes is just for sure the best deck. It's been doing the best, and most good players will preach that it's the best for consistency. It's still very powerful, and you get to play a lot more of the impactful non-engine cards that you can't in other decks. And given that, the next best deck would be Snake Eye Fire King, because you get to use all these powerful cards as well, and that almost nothing else can really compete with that. I want to talk about and have a discussion. What makes it so that there's nowhere left to go in the format, that there's no more creativity, and that we can't push the bounds of what's possible any further? It may seem like there's really nowhere else to go here, but I don't know if that's the case. We've seen in past formats that, as it seems the format is solved, you can innovate something new. You can look for the issues in the format or in a deck, push that to the extreme, and find a new way to play a deck or a new deck, period. If we look at end of 2018, start of 2019, the ban list that encompasses YCS Milan, that Dinkabui won with Prank Kids, and the YCS that got second with Thunder Dragon Dangers, it shows us interestingly. People may have thought that the format was solved after Milan. That Prank Kids was this one-of deck that after people knew what it did, wouldn't do anything, and that the decks to beat would be Thunder Dragon, it would be Striker, and Ultrageist. And it certainly seemed that way if you look at the representation for the decks that entered YCS Sydney. However, that really wasn't the case. I saw that these high-engine decks that could power through these trap cards, or the floodgate that Colossus provided, with dangers and these graveyard effects like Fairy Tale Snow, would actually just steamroll everyone else. And then if you just incorporated the Thunder cards to help you going first and give yourself a meaningful turn 1 end board, you'd have this very powerful deck. And in that tournament, I've never felt like I had so much of an edge based off my deck alone than the rest of the field. And if I run back to that tournament, I feel like I can win it multiple times in a 1,000 game simulation, which is crazy because it's really hard to win a YCS. You have to get lucky and play well and have a good deck. It's a lot of factors, but I feel like I had such an edge at this tournament because people just assumed the format was done progressing, and it really wasn't. There was innovations to be made. And so I want to discuss if that's the case for this format too. Now, oftentimes when we build our decks, we look at the past result in the TCG, and then we also look to the OCG for similarities. But there's now a new way to look at data and somewhere else to draw inspiration from. And that is Yugioh Master Duel. Now, Master Duel has only been around for about 2 years. We just celebrated the 2nd anniversary. And oftentimes, it's behind the TCG and OCG in terms of the card pool it's released. But right now, it's weird. We have very similar formats, not the exact same. Snake Eye is one of the best decks in Master Duel, but they don't have Bonfire, they don't have SP Little Knight, and they don't have Salmon Great Radiant Phoenix. So they are forced to make other adaptations. One of the most popular ones is to play Kashtira cards in the deck. Now, it may seem that this is just filler. They're playing this to make up for the lack of bonfires, and they just need something in there because otherwise your card quality is reduced to a point that it sucks. But that may not be the case, right? Because the Kashtira cards may not just be some filler nonsense. If we look at the OCG, Kashtira Unicorn is limited, Planet Wraithsoft is limited, and Fenrir is banned. So as far as using Kashtira as some sort of engine in Snake Eyes in the OCG, it's not recognizable. It's not something you can really do. As TCG players, we never had the ability to draw that data from Japan or the rest of OCG. It never seemed like a viable option. They never had a chance to even use it. But in Master Duel, it's been quite popular. And let's talk about why that may be, besides just being filler cards. When we're trying to innovate a deck, the important thing to look at is what are its weaknesses and how can we fix those weaknesses. So if you've ever played any of these Snake Eye variants, you'll see that leading with Snake Eyes Ash or Diabell Star, you are vulnerable to cards like Impermanence and Effect Veiler. Any one of those hand traps will check you immediately. You'll require some sort of way to play through it. And Bonfire is a good way to play through it. However, in Master Duel, don't have that. So you're forced to keep innovating and look for an answer past that. If you have the other Ash or the other Diabell Star, depending on what you led with, right? But again, only so many copies of those can be played in a deck. How can we keep going through that? We have seen some innovation already in the TCG. Crossout is one that the OCG was using. However, it's limited there, and that helps you play through these hand traps. And what we've seen at the last YCSs or Lullaby of Obedience. Now, those have popped up for the same reason, where if you get Veilered or Impermed, or even sometimes Ash Blossomed at an early point, Lullaby should help you push through it. You can call your opponent's cards, and assuming it's the mirror match, you are good to go. And even sometimes when it's not the mirror match, calling an Ash Blossom, getting that to the field, and then setting up healer lines could be enough to get you through, because it can almost act as two bodies in that scenario. It may be that Kashtira Unicorn actually does this pretty well too. In Master Duel, you're often playing the 3 Kashtira Unicorns and the Kashtira Birth, as well as sometimes the limited Kashtira Fenrir and Kashtira Wraithsoth. All the cards besides Unicorn there are limited, so they don't have any ability to play more of them. And if this is a strategy we want to adapt for the TCG, we'd have to think critically if we change these numbers. Now, the obvious one, Birth, I think is we would not change. Birth is the one that we'd obviously keep at 1. It's a engine requirement. It does nothing by itself, and it's not a card we want to draw. And if we're not playing Theosis, then if we draw it, it's not like Unicorn would be searching anything else besides a second Birth, and the amount of value that has really isn't that good. Now, we may be used to seeing Kashtira solely as a deck, not an engine itself, but if you cut Theosis, and without a Rise Heart, and Rise Hard and all these type of cards, it does have value in just that, say, Unicorn alone, you can search Birth, you link away Unicorn, revive Unicorn, and it's 2 free bodies without committing a normal summon. And if you look at the Millennium cards I talked about earlier this week, those are good for similar reasons, right? They're bodies without using a normal summon that have pretty much no restrictions and almost no drawback. Now, Kashtira cards are worse extenders in this way because it's 1 less body, and you also have the restriction of having to have no monsters on field to get going. You do have some upside, and they apply a little bit more pressure themselves. If you end on the Unicorn and the Birth, then those are disruptions in a way, especially with Pure Snakehead X playing one of the Princess and not 2, or SP's at 1, or Atlantis is at 1, or Hida's often played at 1. All those cards are good hits with Unicorn that can be pretty crippling. And Birth is a very strong disruption, especially after something like Original is played. Being able to rip apart 3 cards in the grave can be very good for denying Flamebridge plays, Poplar, follow up with Sinful Spoils. It's actually just a really good interrupt, and it's often overlooked. It's a lot of Kashtira's power is behind that disruption. And then even when you go first and you're trying to play with a Unicorn, if you get hand trapped that's not impermanence, you can look at their extra deck and rip apart a card, which very good. For one, that's matchup knowledge, so you can build your board appropriately and play around it. And then also you just cut them off of useful resources when you're hitting a card they play 1 of, which there will always be 1 of in extra deck. There's no way, unless it's some extravagance deck, that there's going to be 3 of a card and your Unicorn's not going to do anything. Now, all that's fine, but we have to actually see, how does these 2 extra bodies provide you coverage against Imperm and Veiler and all that? Let's talk through this. Say we summon Unicorn and we use the effect. Now, obviously, if your opponent thinks you're playing pure Kashtira, you could force out Ash, force out Veiler, force out Imperm. Not a high chance of this, because as people become more aware of this, they're going to stop doing that. That's not a good play, and we're going to get the Birth. So let's assume they do the correct play and they don't hit the Unicorn. If they do, fantastic. That is great for us, because then your Snake Eye cards get to resolve. At least there's a higher chance of them resolving, and that's fantastic. But let's say we get the Birth, we summon the Snake Eyes Ash, and it gets hand trapped. Now, Veiler would be ideal, because then we see their extra deck, we see the matchup, we rip apart a card, fantastic. But say it's Imperm, which is worst case scenario. Okay, what do? We can make IP Masquerena, and that'll put that in the graveyard so that we can put it in spell trap because of Flamebridge, and then have that layer of interruption ready. Next, we can use Birth to revive the Unicorn, and then we can link the IP and the Unicorn away for Princess and get back the Snake Eyes Ash. Then Ash's other effect will be used to get into either Oak or Poplar, and you can see where you're going there to get into your pure Snake Eye combo. You will lack the Jet Synchron stuff, but you will be able to make some sort of field with Flamebridge plus the IP SP setup. You could go like SP up top with the Princess and Grave, IP and Spell Trap Guard Zone, and the Flamebridge there. And then what you can do is you can bring back the IP, and then you can go like Princess, pop the Flamebridge and their card, and then SP banish the Princess and one of their cards. So you're layering the interrupts here, and that'll turn on your IP again. And then you could use like the 2 level 1s you have from Flamebridge plus the IP for Apo, or plus the SP. You can make a Goddess. You have flexible options depending on what you need to do. And that's several layers of interrupts with good follow-up, because you get the Princess back, and you'd have the cards you'd get off of the Snake Eyes off Flamebridge. And assuming you're backing this up with hand traps, or you have more extenders to improve the fields, this is a great spot to be in. It's pretty powerful. So you can play through Veiler or Imperm decently with Unicorn. Let's take it a step further, right? If you opened up Black Witch instead of Ash, if you get Veiler Impermed, you are cut off for the Snake Eye card, which isn't great, but you can still end on a somewhat appealing field. You can go like Dracossack, detach the Unicorn, get 2 tokens, nose into IP, revive the Unicorn, and now you have the Birth Unicorn and the IP, and you're assuming at this point your hand's all hand traps, right? You have no other extension pieces, and you pass here. Maybe you have 2 hand traps, then that's fine, right? Imperm obviously being worst case is you'd miss the first banish off Unicorn, but this is worst case scenario. Say they have Ash Blossom instead, and they'd want to hold the Ash for the Sinful Spoil, which gets you into the engine. We can stop that. We can turn the Diabell Star and the Kashtira Unicorn into Dracossack, and then again make IP with the 2 tokens, then birth back the Unicorn and make Appaloosa. There we go. That's pretty good. We haven't used Sinful Spoil yet, and we have Appaloosa on field. Also, normal summon been used yet, and yeah, this will honestly probably play through hand traps. You can take that a bit further as well, right? You can normal summon level 3 tuner and have made Baron at some point as well. With the Black Witch, you can also try and fit in Celine stuff because the birth will contribute to your spell count, especially if you started Wanted rather than Black Witch. And you can build up quite an impressive field, even if you get hand trapped. And that's pretty good. Now, when you go second, Unicorn can obviously apply pressure too, right? Because that birth plus Unicorn is 2 bodies with 2500 attack. It does threaten attacking over Appaloosa. It's not weak to Appaloosa either. It can also rip apart the extra deck, so when there's an IP play, you summon this into a Flamebridge. If they use Flamebridge targeting IP, and then they summon IP, they have to use the IP there, because you're going to chain the Unicorn, and you're going to rip apart the SP, and make their play kind of worse. They're going to have to do it right away, which can force them a bit. It's scary for them. It's not the hugest pressure in the world, but it is something. And oftentimes, these extenders don't provide that sort of option. So, as YCS Columbia is this weekend, I probably will not play this deck. I don't have enough time to practice it. I'm not comfortable enough with it that I'd want to sign up with it. But I'm curious if other people will play it, if it will have some sort of representation. And if not now, and if there's no ban list, the other 2 YCSs that are in April, YCS Guadalajara and YCS Raleigh. This is a viable option to fix one of the problems with Snake Eye, and it may do so in a way that is better than Lullaby or Crossout, or a way to supplement them if you really wanted to push your going first abilities. This probably will see some sort of play now that it's on the radar. And there's even a chance that it might be the deck that I play at one of these future YCSs, even if it's not right away in Columbia. I'm curious to know what you guys think. Is this a viable option, and have we actually seen another level of innovation in Pure Snake Eye? Is the format truly not done being progressed and evolved yet? Is there still some innovation to be made? And this is also that we should really be looking towards Match to Duel more often for ideas in the format. There's nothing wrong with looking outwards to get ideas, and we can build upon that, because that's what Yu-Gi-Oh is. Even with art, you'll see oftentimes art is built off of the previous art that comes before it, and don't be afraid to look at deck profiles, look at other people's thought processes, and then use that as the base for your deck and if your creative process. It's good. And overall, I wanted to just communicate that even when it seems like a format is done and there's nowhere left to go with it, and we've reached this point of stale, every deck looks the same, it often may not be the case, and there still is this opportunity to be creative and innovate. And that's why I love Yu-Gi-Oh! With this over 10,000 card pool, it's quite incredible. There's almost always something that can be done. And I really implore you guys to not just relinquish yourself to this dreadful format and just be sad about it. Try and push the limits of what's possible. Look to the problems that exist and say, how can I fix this? Now, even if the Kashtira Snake Eye deck isn't too much of an innovation, and then it doesn't excite you, that doesn't mean there's nothing else to fix. Even with other decks that are good, Voice, whatever, look for the problems there and try and push the bounds of that. We already saw some of that with the branded cards being used. That doesn't mean it's done. You could keep pushing the boundaries what's playable in this Voices deck. There's no saying that it's done and set here with its current iteration. So yeah, the format is almost never really done evolving. I'm also curious, what are the formats you guys think never had a chance to fully finish evolving? There are many times where the format had a new ban list or a new set before the best deck was set in stone. We fully reached the end of innovations. Now, this has happened in stuff like the format that Jeff Jones won in 2017 with Pendulums, that UDS. Or say, when Josh Schmidt won with Sprites Runic in October 2022. Or how about the event that Chris LeBlanc won in Minnesota, also October 2023, with an entirely different reason why that format ended quickly. Options to innovate often never appear because the format ends too quickly. And it can be a shame sometimes, because if we look at these formats again, there's so often that there is a lot more to explore in a format. And while everyone is super sad about the current state of Yu-Gi-Oh! And they're not enjoying the TCG that much, it really doesn't mean that you can't explore and keep having fun. So I know I babbled on for quite a bit, but just let me know what you guys think down below in terms of this whole concept of the format not being solved yet. And I'll see you all next time.
Thank you guys for watching the video. A great way to support the channel is to get the TSX1 sleeves on tsx1.com. These are the sleeves I use at every event. They are fantastic quality. They feel really great to shuffle in your hand, your deck, fanning out your grave. They just slide really smoothly, and they last the entire tournament, so you're not compromising quality either. Use the code POTATO10 on the website. You'll get 10% off across everything.